Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about maximizing the business impact of learning. I'm very happy to be with you today. So I'm Laurent Balaguer. I'm VP of Products at Docebo, in charge of all the measurement products, so data analytics measurement. Docebo is a world leader providing learning platforms to all industries to cover multiple use cases. Our clients use our platforms to have their own employees, their customers, their partners learn on many topics all around the world. And I'm very happy to be here talking about this complex topic of measuring, analyzing the impact of learning with two senior professionals of this industry. I will let them introduce themselves, and then we will move on with our discussion today. Maybe Elizabeth, if you can start.
Thank you, Laurent. Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Zombo. I'm from Booking.com. I've been with Booking for the past 5 years. I currently hold the role of a learning lead within our customer service department. Previously, before Booking, I was in an engineering field in Orlando, Florida. And with Booking, I have moved to Amsterdam with my partner and our little dog. I enjoy the topic of analytics, data, and reporting. Like I said, my background was initially in an engineering field paired with cognitive psychology. So naturally for me, the art of how people learn was very intriguing to me, and utilizing data and storytelling was how my path ended up in a learning and development field specializing in data and analytics.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Totally, great experience, and I'm looking forward to hearing many details about it. Mark, your turn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark DiBiase, and I am with a company called LearnLab. My role essentially is a specialist, I would say, in implementation and learning management system optimization. LearnLab has been around for about 5 years now, and we specialize in financial and health industry. As more on the nonprofit side specifically. And essentially our role is to provide end-to-end support from implementation to day-to-day management. And specifically with respect to what comes to this topic of analytics, this hot topic of reporting and data. I usually, when I look at a project, look at that portion actually as part of that project setup. So for me, it's a very interesting topic. I think potentially underutilized by a lot of folks, but certainly something that I look forward to sharing with you in this discussion.
Thank you very much, Mark. So that's very interesting. You have experience in different industry, different use cases, and different perspectives of the same topic. Is how to leverage learning technologies to improve not only the learning experience of people, but also have an impact on the business. The first topic I propose to discuss together is about success metrics. How to measure success in what we do. Maybe in some other functions, it may be easier than for us. For salespeople, well, they have sales revenues. For industry, they have production output. But part of what we do affects people's brain, affects people's knowledge, which is not easy to measure. So I like to focus on this first topic. How do you define the success metrics of what you do? And because it's a big topic, large topic, I would like to split in at different levels and start first at the learning platform level. Obviously, implementing a new learning platform, and I know both of you have had at least one or multiple experience on that, is a big project. So how do you measure the success of such a large project? Who are the key stakeholders in defining these success metrics? And should we split the implementation part from the running phase? Do you think that we should have different metrics for both for these two stages? Who wants to start?
I can jump in with that. I sort of alluded to that point a little bit when I was doing my introduction, and I think part of what I have learned through the years, I've been in the business of learning management systems for about 20 plus years, is we usually bring forward to our stakeholders the idea of what does your output look like? And what we mean by output is once you've created a program, you've built out what you feel are the good learning points, you push that out to users, but how do we measure, to your point, Laurent, what the success of that is? How was that implemented? So I try to bring the discussion around reporting and the outputs of reporting and the analytics side of things into the implementation phase so that it's front and center at the beginning of the conversation. So as we build through a project, we can actually think about what those endpoints are. Am I able to sort of see this data against this measurement? How will I measure a potentially behavioral success rate as opposed to a more tangible piece like a test score, which is a very simple thing to do. So I bring that in very early in the conversation, and it tends to morph, and sometimes it does actually affect the way that the program will be built based on what we want for outputs.
Thank you. So clarify the outputs and agree on specific metrics behind each of them, and do that as early as possible at the implementation phase. Thank you.
That's right.
Elizabeth, what's your experience on this?
Yeah, so similarly to Mark, how we measure, it is a very complex and large topic. So I do agree with splitting it into chewable parts. So at the learning platform level, what are the success metrics that we use at Booking? So we measure success on 6 levels. There's participation, reaction, learning. So those are the first 3 levels. And then results, return, behavior, and return on investment. From an LMS, the learning management system, we focus on participation, reaction, and learning primarily, right? This is the tool that helps us measure with our intended audience, the participation rates, the reaction rates, which we gain from surveys, and our learning, which is that immediate learning that happens on the job. So that is what we can obtain within our LMS. And of course, with survey tools, we can build that eventually out for the behavior impacts as well for that 30, 60, and 90 day. Okay, so measuring, participation, reaction, and learning, we measure from the learning management system. We define that with our key stakeholders, similarly to how Mark is describing, by having a conversation with what the outputs of the learning implementation should be. What do we want to gain from the business? What does good look like? And based on starting with actually a conversation around the behavior change, the results that we want to see from the company. I'm unique in the sense that I work specifically in a customer service environment. So I can be very specific on what we want those behavioral and results-centered impacts to be. And then we work backwards as to, okay, how do we use our LMS to strategically design that program to meet and to enable the business and the SMEs who are supporting us in the content design to reach that output. So those key stakeholders, to be very specific there, would be conversations with our L&D team and the SMEs of the project that were tasked with designing learning solutions for. So key in that ADDIE cycle, so in the analysis phase, that really help us define that expected engagement and results. I do think we need a separate implementation strategy from Run, and we enable our LMS to do this for us in very a key way as well, because participation, reaction, and learning generally happen within an implementation phase. Who is our target audience? What are we trying to launch them? And then what do we expect our targeted engagement to be? That can be different depending on if it's a 100, for example, a compliance course that has, you need to have 100% engagement with this course to the best of your ability. Or if it's a program in which you're launching to a certain audience that's not mandatory and you have targets around what do you want that, how you want that audience to engage with that learning program. So the implementation generally for our teams help us design that baseline knowledge. Then once we start a run phase, there can be sometimes separate KPIs that we design from an L&D standpoint of how do we see that engagement over time? How do we want those baselines to evolve? And then similarly, with topics, for example, like learning to proficiency, do we eventually see learning to proficiency of new joiners for our company, or individuals supporting booking.com with customer service inquiries? How quickly do they get to that proficient category, and how long does that take? And can we impact, let's say, that lead time for those individuals? So I do think it is important to have a separate implementation from Run KPIs, but it is very product specific.
Thank you very much to both of you. So that's quite interesting, Elizabeth, what you were saying. So yeah, clearly, definitely, we need to separate both phases and have a whole evaluation strategy. I understand that, yes, so the more learning KPIs are in the LMS, and then you have business metrics that are the end, the outputs that Mark was talking about. Maybe a follow-up to both of you. We hear more and more the need to also be able to measure quickly so that you can improve fast, and this concept of leading indicators versus lagging indicators. Leading indicators being indicators that may not be perfect, may not be the final output measurement, but have the great advantage of coming early and being able to provide you early information about the possible trends. Is this something that you are using regularly in your jobs, in different learning projects that you have to take care of?
I was just going to say, it's actually quite dependent of the project. Traditionally, I think what we need to do for our stakeholders is to take them away from this notion of put something out there, let it run, and then at the very end, look at your reports 6 months down the road and decide, was it successful or not? So I think that idea is the shift where this, and this is essentially where I think this tool Insights is going to be quite amazing, is from the ground up, from the moment you launch that, you're able to capture your metrics and see exactly at this point in time what is going on, what's the completion rate, how successful are folks, and potentially even, if you do something like a pilot, get that group ahead of the rest of the team in terms of trying to balance what you learned, were you able to apply it? And in some cases, we need to tweak programs depending on how they're built. If they're very behavioral heavy, that sometimes needs to be tweaked. If it's very technical, and to Elizabeth's point about being like a compliance program, that's more direct. It's more factual. A compliance program, I'm looking for a pass rate. I'm looking for, did you learn the rules, and are you able to apply these new rules that are brought down usually by external regulators or legislation? So it's not something that is warranted by the company that you work for necessarily, but it's something that is from an outside source that says, no, these are the rules, these are the laws. So that can be very specific, and I think sometimes easier to measure as opposed to something like a behavioral change, or where you're trying to take an individual from a level of basic customer service and what they understand in their own interactions with businesses that they work with or deal with, to a level that is what the company wants their employees to emulate and to show to their clients. And I'll just kind of extend that. I worked heavily in contact centers in my past lives. I used to be a facilitator, manage teams and so on. And that was always sort of front and center, was that customer service element. The technical side was, I'm going to show you where to get the information. So I'll teach you how to get it. But the behavioral side, that's how do you manage that client's expectations? And it's just your voice, right? Your tone, your voice. Those were things that were measurable, but again, very difficult to teach, in a course, right? So that became sort of the measurement of success in part. And I think things, additional pieces that are available in the LMS, like an observational checklist, those are the pieces that we tie into some of these programs, especially when it comes to behavioral skills enhancement and things of that nature.
Thank you very much, Mark. What about you, Elizabeth?
Yes, as far as lead indicators go, we would leverage the same types of opportunities. So a lot of the lead indicators, it's very, very dependent on the product that is launched. In our case, we could leverage user testing to help establish and really solidify what we expect the lead indicators to be. Again, I work in a very customer service centric learning team at booking.com. So the lead indicators can be very, very specific with some of our larger data sets that we have that we can tap into, which I can talk a little bit later about in this conversation and how we do that. But that is something where it would really be defined within user testing and very dependent on the product. But yes, we definitely leverage lead indicators.
Thank you very much. So there are two things that I note from what you've said both and multiple times. First is this concept of use case. That every time you talk about your evaluation strategy, how to leverage leading indicator, you naturally come to not necessarily the program, the use case level, saying that for compliance, of course, the approach will be different than for customer education or for customer success. And the other point is that leading indicators is a way to have analytics become a daily routine. Also, it's not just to have early signs, but is make sure that multiple stakeholders are in charge of monitoring the performance of the learning at all stages and on a daily or weekly basis. And that's another value of these indicators, that they can be part of the responsibilities of multiple stakeholders during the lifetime of a project. Maybe the last aspect of the defining success would be at the learner level. So really now zooming in at just one learner. Is it something that you've done in the past, and how do you do that compared to the very large perspective at the platform, at the project level? What about the learner? How do you define success at the learner level? Maybe Elizabeth first.
At the learner level, we would measure success. They would still have the same ability to assess their own KPIs from that participation, reaction, and learning feedback. So they would understand. They would be able to deliver that impact with the reaction, with reactionary surveys, and understand their own learning capabilities. Now, we would monitor the engagement with the product, and then that collective behavioral and result impact after the product as well is implemented. So very dependent on the type of product that is launched. However, looking into solutions like how do we enable learners to also tap back into learning in small bite-sized portions, again, facilitated either through the LMS or through additional tools to help them practice that on-the-job behavior. And observational checklists were just discussed as well. However, that is also a wonderful tool that we leverage to also collectively understand that behavioral change as well.
I think, adding on to what you're saying, Elizabeth, I think another element that I've seen is the engagement between sort of a peer coach, a manager, or someone that is able to lead that individual on their journey, especially from the behavioral standpoint. Again, the technical side, I think, is a little bit easier, but from the behavioral side, I think that helps sort of leading by example, I guess, right? So you have, depending on how this initiative happens, is it, new employees coming in? Is it existing employees that are being upskilled? You're going to have a variety of different uptakes on that. Some folks are, they're right on it. They get it. They're part of the corporate culture already. So they've already bought into it. The challenge comes with those folks that are maybe new to the organization, are brand new to customer service. Trying to impart those skills becomes something that goes beyond the technical. So the technical sort of forms the basics. And then the behavioral comes by, watching your peers, getting positive and some negative feedback, from your manager or your coach or your peer coach along those lines. So I think tools, what you were mentioning, Elizabeth, around things like surveys, those are great tools because you can dig in beyond the factual information. Did you pass a test with, an acceptable mark? That's great, but that's only one part of it. That's the basics. I can always show you where to find information. But I think in terms of, if I think of sort of a salesperson that's learning for the first time to interact with a client, they may have some sales experience, but based on maybe the environment, the product, the current market conditions, they have to adjust their behavior to react to a client that, may be concerned about things like investments, or there's a new health scare, or there's something where they want that professional to be able to present themselves as a confident person, a knowledgeable person. And those things, a lot of that can be taught, but I found in my experience, a lot of it is based on practice. So reinforcing those behaviors, following up in terms of, where were you 3 months ago and where are you today, and reinforcing that journey, hopefully on an uphill, that things are improving. And I think that helps to solidify the individual's confidence in their own skills and their own mannerisms and behaviors. So it's really, I think, Elizabeth, you're talking about, the psychological aspects of things, and I think a lot of it comes to that, to some extent.
Definitely. And if I may just add on the tail end of there, and why that's so important to us as well, is to really understand that learner experience and how they're interacting and engaging with programs and products, and really focusing on that 70% of the 70-20-10 model. We do it to maintain credibility and relevance with the business, because ultimately what you're describing there is identifying skill gaps. So it's so important that we leverage this data. And a lot of companies focus a lot on just maintaining a baseline or getting a baseline for some of these KPIs, L&D KPIs. How do you measure success? But really why we're after doing that is for that learner and to maintain credibility with the business. Because if we evolve that view from being an order taker as an L&D department, or an afterthought, which I know a lot of us can relate to, and start identifying skill gaps. So using tools like surveys and observational checklists, SMEs and L&D professionals will be able to identify skill gaps, which is really the future of L&D, in my opinion, right? Is where we're trying to go, is help identify that so we can proactively build programs and leverage the business to say, hey, we believe you're going to get this return on investment if we improve this skill gap within this population of individuals. We know this because of X, Y, and Z. Let's test and see how this performs. So I think it's a very, very good point that you're bringing up, and why it's so important in the larger context of everything.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy that, we can conclude this first part on the importance of focusing on behaviors and skills. In a way, we as learning professionals, we are able to provide learning solutions and to help business with business problems. But in between, there is the behaviors that we can influence, that we can change, and the skills that we can add to a specific group of people. And that's really important for everyone, not only in the learning world, but also in the business part, to be aware of that. Moving to another part about the how to measure the business impact of learning. I have two questions for you. First, whose responsibility should it be? Should it be L&D's responsibility, your business customers, whether they're internal or external? Should it be both responsibility? So that's question number one. And how is it difficult for you to get access to this business data if you have to be part of the chain of proving this business success? Maybe Mark first.
Yeah, for sure. I think we got the rhythm going now.
Yeah.
I would say both. I think it's always a partnership between your stakeholders in your business and the learning and development team. In terms of, that conversation starts at the moment that the business decides, hey, we have this gap. We have this issue. Sometimes it starts from a tiny little seed that it's, customer concern that was raised, and all of a sudden it becomes this, well, wait a second. We're realizing now that we don't have the proper tools to deal with this specific situation, event, scenario, whatever that case is. And then this becomes, a project. So you know very early on what you're looking to solve for, which is that potential skill gap, that behavioral gap, potentially just a technical gap. And then that forms the basis of how your program will be built and implemented, delivered, run, and then eventually reported on. So keeping those initial seeds or questions in mind throughout that project and right up to the end, I think is what is important in order to be able to show the evolution of where this, if we take an individual, where they started and where they're at today. Because I won't say end, because I don't think there's no end to the journey. I think it's just at specific points in time, I can show your progression. So hopefully you're always on, the uphill when we're looking at the statistics. So I think that partnership has to be there, because even the business priorities can shift. And sometimes it's not so much about having to rebuild a program, but maybe the way they want to see the data, or the way that the data can be presented, can be looked at from a different perspective in some cases. So I think it's an evolutionary process, not just, last year we delivered this, we reached our targets, we're done, thank you, let's move on to the next one. I think it's something that's carried throughout, whether it's even an evolution from the program level. That's another aspect to it. Is, we see lots of programs where it's like, basic, intermediate, and proficient, right? So it's a process that I go through to get to what is an expected level of expertise.
Similarly, I agree that both the L&D team and the business are responsible for driving the conversations. The business, I think, of course, they generally come and they have a business need, and it's the responsibility of the L&D team to help translate that need through a proper learning needs analysis to understand and help the business or the SME really understand what key parts they can potentially measure. And it's a paired ownership. So a lot of the time, a lot of learning professionals just get we need a training created because we're experiencing X, Y, and Z, and we would like to drive the business here. And an L&D professional can now, with the tools that we have enabled within an LMS system or within business data as well, be able to provide templates and structure to saying, okay, we hear you. Let's run a proper analysis to understand how we can influence this specific business need and what that output should be. So understanding that return on investment for the company, and then kind of working backwards and translating that into L&D KPI, and what that really looks like. Who is your audience? What engagement do you want them to have with this program? What does good look like? What behavior are you trying to enable or change or disable? So it definitely should always be in collaboration with the business. As I was talking earlier as well, again, there's that importance with an L&D shift now that I believe that we're on the precipice of, is how do you maintain credibility and relevance with the business and start evolving in L&D work, instead of being an order taker or afterthought, to being that future mindset shift of we noticed a skill gap. How can we design training that we believe would improve X, Y, and Z? So I do think that critical shift from input measures to outcomes, and then it's tracked repeatedly post an intervention. So again, you can start measuring those behavior shifts at the 30, 60, 90 day marks is very important, but it is a shared responsibility. How easy is it to get access to business data? So it is very important that you have access to business data. Now, if you have standard security measures within your company, it should be quite easy to of course, adhere to those security measures so that you're using the data in an appropriate way, and connect in with that larger data lake. So you compare L&D data with the business data as well. So you compare L&D data with business data as well. So it is something that is very much needed. Again, if you're looking to drive that behavioral impact, that return on investment, and you will need to connect with your business data, but it should be the ownership of the business to help enable that for you in a safe and secure manner.
And if I can add to what you're saying, as you were speaking, I'm thinking, one of the, I guess, measures of success if you take this program, take that unique program, and maybe there's variations on that particular program, but by comparison, you can potentially identify. We have sort of 3 versions of this type of training. This one version that was taken by this audience seems to have the best impact. Look at the behavioral improvements, the technical improvements, knowledge improvements that we have. So even beyond the individual or the groups of people, the people side of things, I think there is a measurable aspect to it that can be from the program, the tangible item that we're building to say, hey, you know what? We changed this format. We've added, more graphics, or we added audio or deleted audio, whatever the case may be. And this tends to engage the audience better. We got better results from this particular program because of, XYZ, the way it's built, the way it's presented. It's, a short version as opposed to a long version. Those types of things can actually be really impactful for the business in the current state. And then for future development, because that can be brought back on the table and say, hey, last year we did this type of training. Training A was good, but look at training B. We made these changes, and here's the results of training B. So we would recommend, and this is where, to your point, Elizabeth, about, us being more involved and maybe more proactive about being part of that conversation, not just order takers, is to come down and have this ability to be able to present, and sometimes it's just like, 2 or 3 lines of data. It doesn't have to be a lot, to those stakeholders to say, listen, from our professional and expert side of things, this is what we recommend to you because look how well this worked, several months or years ago.
Thank you. So this is very interesting. So definitely it is a shared responsibility that can, on one side, reinforce the partnership between business and learning teams and help the learning team to reinforce their role as business partners and be much more than just order takers. Maybe last question that I have for you. So we've talked a lot about, defining success of learning at different levels, measuring the business impact. When you look at the different trends and the different technology disruptions that are likely to affect our industry, which ones would you select as likely the most impactful, and especially those who may change your perspectives on measuring and proving the impact of learning?
Yes, I think that's a very, very good question. Of course, I'm very invested in understanding more about artificial intelligence and how it's going to impact some of the tools that we already have. I think most specifically with L&D, it opens up the door for different types of user analytics. If we just talk about baseline behavioral data, we're going to, by impacting, let's say, artificial intelligence and clicks and then being able to, we're going to have more data to measure. And I think that plethora of data can get overwhelming for any L&D professional. So what's very important to me and our teams is that we still focus on what is business specific and where we're going to make the biggest impact. So although we're investigating these new tools and we're so excited to use them, it's making sure that they maintain the relevance into how we're going to plan to measure that return on investment at the end of the day. So consciously learning about what we can measure with these new tools and with artificial intelligence and how that's impacting our learners' ability to get learning material, understand learning material, and engage with it. Most importantly, on how we're going to continue to measure the success with all of this data coming in and organize it accordingly. One last thing I would add there as well, again, with my customer service lens with booking, is the tools that we have utilizing AI to make them smarter, to make them faster. From an L&D perspective, it's so important that we're in a wonderful opportunity to focus less on process-driven business changes and focus more, again, on that skill-based learning. So where we can really drive understanding in our employee base skill gaps, helping them provide with learning material that's either AI generated or focused using external tooling to help really understand where our impacts and our opportunities exist. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I mean, I have, AI for me, I see it as this. It's an infant, right? It's learning as we learn about it. It's learning about us, and I think part of what we need with AI right now, if that's one of the main things I think is that's a hot topic in the industry, of course, right? Whatever we can leverage that can do something for us, yay. But I think what needs to be understood is it's not, you don't flip a switch and say, there you go, the magic is on, all your problems are solved. I think that artificial intelligence is just that. It's a tool. It's one of the tools that we use, just like we use the LMS, just like we use, a reporting tool, a database. And that tool needs to learn. It needs to have the ability to be tweaked. And I think there's also a potential downside where it could potentially make folks a little bit overconfident in cases where, I'm just going to run this through AI and I'm going to get the perfect solution. Well, that's not always the case. You need to know if you're going to be able to evaluate a solution that's presented to you, you need to be an expert on that as well. Because then it's just an opinion. You don't have anything factual to base yourself on. So I think behind the scenes, the data points remains that critical piece. And I think you mentioned, Elizabeth, the overwhelming amount of data can certainly turn people off. So I think being able to customize a visual of this is where you were, this is where we're at, and this is where we're going. That's the trend. To me, that's kind of the hottest thing that somebody will look for. If I put myself in a manager's shoes, and I'm looking at I'm thinking now of the my team dashboard specifically around skills. And if I go in as a manager, I look at my heat map and I can tell at a glance, this is where I need to put my focus. Half my team needs help with this. 3/4 of my team are expert at that. Terrific. I can lessen my impact or, what I need to focus on here. And let's say next month, we're going to focus on this part. So I can then do my job, leveraging AI for, things like recommendations, go through the catalog, look at the skill tags, the technical side of things that can help me then pick out maybe 2 or 3 things that I'm going to suggest to my team and say, hey guys, I found this. This is great. Try this out. And now I can go ahead and start measuring where we were, where we're at, and where we're going.
Thank you very much. So AI skills are the two.
It's great, but it's scary at the same time, right?
Yeah, clearly, yeah. It's a lot of potential, but a lot of challenges ahead.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for this conversation and for sharing so much of your experiences. As a conclusion, I would just like to conclude this talk by sharing in a few minutes how we see this topic of learning analytics at Docebo and how it affects the way we build our products and our solutions to respond to these challenges. First, we see the needs of our customers in 3 categories. Number 1, they all need to collect and monitor learning data just to do their job. For that, multiple stakeholders need on a weekly, on daily, on a monthly basis, different kinds of data that have to be very granular so that they can do their job. And here, of course, the answer is, a performing reporting system. But that's not enough. Many stakeholders also in all our customers need to be able to monitor and analyze the learning performance. For that, raw data is not enough. They need dashboards and they need metrics to be able to analyze, to improve, and to communicate on their learning performance. So here it's still about learning metrics. So it's 100% learning, but on a more analytics. And here we need dashboards to be able to do this monitoring and analysis and communication. Yeah. And last but not least, as we discussed today, to be able to explain the business impact of learning. And that's really what we've discussed today, because this is the final objective. This is the outcome that our customers expect, but also it's also a way to be perceived as a strategic business partner and not just an order taker. That's how we are building our products in this perspective of providing a satisfying solution for all these three needs. We talked about use cases. And so here, what you see here are the 8 main use cases that we see in our customers. Typically, our customers have multiple use cases and use one learning platform to serve multiple use cases. But we believe that first, the use case is the right level to define an adapted learning and evaluation strategy. The strategy will be different for compliance, for sales enablement, for customer education. There is more homogeneity for the business metrics in one use case. So it's also easier to consider the business impact at the use case level. And the stakeholders are also typically different for each use case. So this is why the use case is very important when you consider a learning platform, when you implement a new learning platform or a learning project, but also when you think about the evaluation strategy. And last, this is our 360-degree perspective of the value of learning. There are other models, but this is the one we use internally to define how our customers measure what's everything they need to know about the value of learning. So this is the model that we use internally. Now, then we use it also externally, and like today, to just show that this is what we believe is important when we talk about learning, whether it's from a purely learning perspective or a business perspective. And there are 2 types of changes that we can impact: behaviors on the top of the model and things that are more quantifiable, easier to measure, like knowledge, like maybe training as a revenue stream. So nothing is more important, less important, but everything has to be considered. And depending on the use case, you may focus on one part of the model and less on others. But this is, again, how we see this complex topic and how we think about our products to satisfy all the needs of our customers. That's all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Elizabeth, for this great conversation. I hope it was useful and enriching to everyone who is listening. And I hope to see you soon in other events and other webinars. Have a great day.